How's it going? My name's Kenny Beats. I'm a producer, I'm a songwriter, I'm a musician. I work with a lot of different bands, a lot of different rappers, a lot of different artists, and I've been using Apogee since I was a young kid. Music was always in my house as a kid. My dad just listens to anything you can think of, any type of genre, any type of decade. I started playing instruments when I was like 8, 9 years old and started playing guitar and then drums and then later like keyboards. It was really just this thing I did at home or around my family. Started making music on the computer around 14 or 15, and I would play my friends the beats I made on the computer, and everybody would be like, no way you made this. This sounds like Timbaland. It didn't sound like Timbaland at all, but I always knew I was gonna do something in music, but I had this weird disconnect between being a musician and being like a beat maker or being a producer on my laptop. For me, the recording of it was always the hard part. I would plug in my guitar to the amp and listen to it through all these pedals, and it would sound so good to me. It'd sound like a record. And then I would try to get my guitar into the computer through all these different, like, I don't know if I could say the name, like iRig or whatever the hell they were, and it would just sound terrible. I couldn't figure out how to make my playing on instruments, how it sounded in the room, sound like that on the records I was making, so I just kept the two worlds separate. 15 or 16, I remember getting put onto the idea of you need an interface. Like you need not just these little like fly by night, like 1/4 inch USB things. Like you actually need something that you can plug in to your computer that makes the guitar sound good before it gets to the program. That's what I started to understand in like my sophomore year. And I remember going to the Apple store because I was like, I didn't know anything besides Guitar Center, Sam Ash, the Apple store. And I went there and there was a Duet, and it was a little over my price range, but I think like might have got it for a gift, or I might have like split it with my dad or something. That was the only thing I listened to my beats through or played instruments through for the rest of high school. And so I still have my first Duet, and it still turns on. To me, it just made my beats sound better, and it made the computer sound better, and it made like, when I would bounce my beats, they sounded bigger for some reason. And I was like, okay, like it took me years to even understand really what the Duet was and how I was using it. And that was the first thing I could find at the closest store to my house, you know? All through high school, I was just doing whatever I could to get better at anything I was doing. And then I go to Berklee, I take my little Duet with me. I used my Duet through all of Berklee, went to Berklee, somehow graduated, ended up in LA. All of a sudden, I started renting a room in Burbank that we nicknamed The Cave, and a whole new chapter began. And at The Cave, basically just to document, if I didn't make it through the next couple months, we wanted to make sure there was some proof of like what was going on there. And The Cave started, and it was a YouTube show, would basically just show me working with artists through any series of problems where we have to record some instruments, or we have to write a very obscure song or deal with a weird sample to chop. And it kind of showed a lot about how I work, a lot about how kind of songs are written these days with all different types of people and genres and things, and a lot more of my personality and the artists I work with's personality than people see when we do normal interviews. You know, when you don't know people, certain interviews can feel like, not like you're at home. And The Cave felt like home for a lot of people. That was like my recording masterclass. And it became this place where I was tracking 2 to 3 vocalists a day, every single day. More difficult than any years I had at music school or learning to engineer by the book, because I had to just figure things out myself, and it started teaching me what I need from gear that I use and what my process is. I didn't really know I had a process. I didn't really know what workflow meant until I had one, you know? And doing stuff with bands in there with one mic on a cab in the same booth that I'm recording Thundercat for the first time, I was putting me through the ringer. And the only piece of gear I really had connecting all the stuff I was using to the computer was my Duet. But the next part of the story is a sad part of the story. And I built another studio once things at The Cave got too hectic. And in that studio, I got a different interface, and I needed more inputs and more outputs, all these things. I had never plugged in 10 things before. People recommended the one that a bunch of people I knew had, and felt fine. Then I was with a friend of mine, and my friend said, why don't you get a Symphony? And I was like, what's the difference? Like, it's same price, you know what I mean? And like, they both do the same thing. Like, what am I gonna hear the difference? And he goes, I don't know, maybe you won't, but I hear the difference. And that hurt my feelings. And that made me feel competitive. Where like my friend was like, I can hear the difference. I'm not sure you'll hear it, but I decided to try listening to some of my stuff through a symphony. And so basically just bounces of beats and songs and just MP3s of things I'd made. And it sounded different. I went home and I researched it a little more, and then I ended up getting a symphony. And as soon as I recorded one guitar, one microphone, played one beat through it, I called Mac and I freaked out and I got super mad. And I was like, you think I can't hear this? It's not like a 3%, it was like a big percentage. And I was like, I can hear this drastically. Like I can hear this obviously. It's a difference. The symphony was the first time I could hear a lack of conversion, because I would notice the same guitars and the same microphones recorded through a different piece of gear, and they had this kind of tint to it. Something about that rubs me differently. Not always bad, but just differently. And I remember hearing like a huge, like 808 heavy rap beat thing through the symphony that I had just made that day for the first time on it. And I was like, oh, there's nothing blocking me and what I'm making, but like actually something getting put around all the audio that's getting run through here. And then when I got on Symphony Control, it was so easy. And I've made one template that says the names of all of my instruments, all of my hardware, everything that I have plugged in, and it stays the same unless I plug something else in and then I just change my template. But I turn my computer on, I turn my interface on, I record immediately. People are always shocked when I tell them about the way I work now is I've set up a template in my DAW. I have it in Pro Tools, I have it in Ableton, and then also a template for my Symphony where every single thing that I have in that studio is plugged in direct. All I would do is route the input from my compressor and the output from my computer, and then I would just save it and name it and say compressor 1, boom. And now every time I search compressor 1 in my computer, the plugin comes up. It's a little device. You just add that device to the track, and then now you're going through a real piece of hardware. So in effect, you can sit down in my studio now, walk up to anything in the room, and then point out any piece of hardware, and as long as you know the name and it's on, you can record right away. You don't need to figure out all these different things about how someone's run their studio if you know that these things are going through the interface, it's labeled, and all I have to do is hit record. Now I'm working on a new space where I can take this workflow even farther and kind of do it on double the scale. Who knows how many symphonies I'm gonna end up putting together ultimately, but if anyone comes to work with me, anything's accessible. And the symphony's been the easiest way I could find to bridge that gap. I'm entering a new phase right now in my career as a producer, as a musician, as a songwriter. I'm building my first live room. It's a combination of everything I've ever done. I've tried to figure out what I need out of a space and what my type of recording looks like when I can really think big. And one of the worst feelings in the world is to have an idea that's bigger than what you can make happen. And this happens in music sometimes where you just hear an orchestra in your head. I could maybe find a string player, I could maybe do it on synths or whatever, but my idea is actually 40 people in a room playing on something. And it's hard because you can't pick your ideas. The advice I would have given my younger self, I would have told myself to start sucking sooner. Like I would have told myself to start messing up and failing faster. I spent so many years debating if I should try to do something or if I'll like this or if this will be my style, when it only takes 7 minutes to really like see if an idea works or not. So if someone says, should we do a bridge or should we change this chorus or does that need a harmony? We could sit here and talk about it for 30 minutes. And the same with your career and your life. Like maybe I do want to do bands, or maybe I do want to play guitar, or maybe I want to get better at recording myself. So whatever it is, I would just start being terrible at it today. In your late 20s, your late 30s, your late 40s, whatever it is, you want to be bad now, you know? And I waited to be bad at stuff till the last couple years. I played guitar my entire life and then sat there with one of my favorite bands in the whole world and was like, damn, I probably should like get a little better at recording guitars, huh? You know what I mean? It took being thrown into fire for me to kind of go figure out my way. So like, Go fail for a while, and then you can go promote yourself. But don't try to do both at the same time, I don't think. That's my opinion.